Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to another of the Educators in VR cyberbullying events here. This one is in Engage. We have been, we're almost done with our month for 2024, and we have been so honored to be working with the Bridgemakers initiative, the project, and also with the Troll Project, along with the amazing Dr. Ruth Diaz and the wonderful Molli Aronce, and we are so thrilled to actually have them here as part of our partners in this year's cyberbullying month, where we, educators in VR and everything, we dive really deeply into cyberbullying from all angles, and we are so honored that Dr. Ruth has worked so brilliantly with Molli to bring us new perspectives, new angles, new ways of thinking about all of this. I just love that. So invite all of you to come away from the wall. You can come on down close, make this an intimate kind of experience. And so again, my name is Laurel Van Fossen, and I want to introduce you to Dr. Ruth Diaz and Molli Aronce, who are the founding members of Bridgemakers. This is something I often teach with XR business and other business things, to always look for a gap in the market. This is a gap in the market. We have we do a lot of training for event moderation for VR event hosts and community leaders and things. We have all kinds of different programs. Our cyberbullying helps to address the issues that many community leaders have, as well as individuals. But there needed to be a group that brought together leaders from around the world, all the different platforms that are leading social VR communities, to discuss their unique challenges, to really understand how to keep their community healthy, thriving, evolving, and deal with, okay, I feel like it's therapy lessons sometimes. I feel like the police sometimes, when you lead a community, there is a lot of challenges because you have personalities that come together that are either not used to being together, or they find conflict wherever they go. And we need to really work. One of the things that Dr. Diaz specializes in is conflict resilience. And boy, working with a social VR community, that's a whole lesson right there. So I'm going to turn it over to them to talk about this amazing group that's made up of these community leaders from all across the swath of the metaverse, who are coming together and finding a new home to support each other. All right, it's all you.
Yay. Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for the clapping. As you all know, I really enjoy and appreciate emojiing as a way to give feedback and create that intimacy and immersive connection. So please find your emojis and engage, as if you have aha moments, if you don't like something, if you're curious. Yep, clapping, all of those are welcome. And so, yes, I am Dr. Diaz, and this is my so many things. And
there's no label.
Friend, colleague, partner in crime, so many things. And Molli Aronce. And so we're going to introduce ourselves a little more deeply later on, but we're going to dive into some of these slides, see what we get. Okay, so this is what we're going to be learning today, which is understanding cyberbullying's impact. What is a case example of what that actually looks like? And you may all be surprised to learn this story. We're going to talk about healing from cyberbullying and what that looks like, and growing leadership, and then also what building bridges looks like. We're going to see how far we get. This is our debut of Bridgemakers. It's a relatively young movement. And so, but we already have a lot to show you. And so we'll see how far we get today. And really happy to be here. So, I went backwards. That's new. Okay, so first we're going to talk about who is Bridgemakers. And you're going to see pages like this, where you're going to see a lot of photographs. Most of these are out of VR chat. We are app agnostic, and we'll say more about that later. But this particular photo, as you can see, Kermit Frog is maybe going to whack somebody with their instrument there. But this was me hanging out at a community event in VR for Curious Kibble, which some of you heard do a presentation a few weeks ago. And so Curious Kibble, part of what I do on the weekends, especially as I go around and I tour the communities that I'm mentoring and supporting. And this was me getting a kind of farther away shot and then getting kind of enamored and taking a selfie. So that's your full confession there. But you're going to see a lot of photos today. Hopefully that will keep you entertained. So, oh, that's fascinating. Okay, so it goes back unless I click on the thing specifically. Now we're going to just cover briefly who is Bridgemakers. Molly, I'll let you take that one if you'd like.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Bridgemakers right now, again, is a young movement, but we have so many names that were on a slide. There it is again. And different positions that we're connecting, people are connecting to. Up here, you can see some of their names, and you know, you can see our friend here, Laurel, core advisor. And yeah, we're growing this as we go in collaboration with people that are part of Bridgemakers. So these roles are well, these are the core advisors, but yeah, I mean, these are people that we've known in our time in VR, and yeah.
So part of the vision of Bridgemakers is about pooling resources. So we're going to talk about, oh, and Matt, I'm so glad you're here, but your audio is a little loud. Do you mind muting yourself? Okay. So part of what we've learned in our work together in social VR is recognizing that there are big gaps in leadership upskilling and development. And so how do we build a bridge with grassroots community builders, which can include community leaders? But community builders is a very diverse term that also means content creators and influencers. And how do we take our professional network and apply that to these younger, early leaders who are kind of learning the hard way how to be leaders of this very fluid and volatile at times landscape? And so Bridgemakers is part of the answer to that. And these brave beings have, especially our advisors, many of them have worked with us on other projects and other experiences. And we are only a few months old, but we already have moderators and helpers, and we have a leader in training, which some of you got to meet the other day. And here's just another entertaining photo. This was actually a meeting with one of my advisors. I meet with him weekly. We talk about spatial design and environmental design and how to communicate stories without words. And that's him on the little rubber ducky. And we sat in this pool. We were talking about dimensional proportional shifts. And we sat in this pool and had a whole conversation about environmental design while he was floating on this ducky. And I was like, you know, there are moments when I reflect back on the photos and I think, okay, my job to some degree, which is mostly unpaid, has some kind of charming moments to it. This is some other examples for you of what these events and moments can look like, just to get the absurdity shock for those of you who don't spend a lot of time in VR chat out of the way. I thought I'd give you a really quick snapshot of what you're going to see. I don't think most of these go this extreme, but these are actual meetings I was having with leaders and community builders and the pictures we took along the way. Yes, Tim, you are raising your hand. And I think you're on mute. There we go. Oh, still on mute. Try again. I see you pointing, but you're still on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
You got me. I've noticed something in the group of people that let me take them on world tours. Where, not the blue-haired girl, but the other one, where is she?
She's in a porta potty. most specifically. But this is actually, I think, a ripped game world on Paris, I believe. It's ripped off of a zombie game world or something. And we walked by this porta potty, and this person just decided, I really want a photo taken in this place. So we went for it, and then we kept walking and talking about leadership. So,
Oh, it's an
yeah,
epidemic.
it is. It is, definitely. Okay, next slide. Thank you for the question, Jim. So then we're going to introduce ourselves now. So Molli and I are core leaders. And Molli, you want to talk about
That we
this?
are. So yeah, I'm Molli Aronce, she, her, and I entered the realms of VR being hired by Meta as the second community manager for Horizon Worlds. I was there for just under 2 years, and during that time, I had met Dr. Diaz, and that began our journey, which we will go into more depth after they introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you all know I turned into a zombie coming back online. So yeah, I'm a social scientist, and I identify as that, even though I do have a doctorate in clinical psychology, because I'm not licensed. I actually gave my license up when I came into social VR to work professionally, because licenses are based on states. And that makes it really weird and convoluted to try to navigate our professional identity from the therapist end of things. And I felt like there was enough room for me to grow as a social scientist. And I specialize in conflict resiliency. And Molli and I have these are just a couple photos of our very long journey. We're going to briefly tell you a story here, and I'm going to let Molli start. And this is in the realm of understanding what cyberbullying can look like.
When I first, when I started at Meta, I hadn't been in virtual reality at all. I hadn't even really thought about it. I had been a community manager, mostly for the gaming world on 2D platforms. And so I was pretty excited to, embrace this new technology that I had never been a part of. And, especially with Meta. And so when I started, I started to introduce myself and be introduced to different communities and community leaders that were building within Horizon. And I remember Dr. Diaz had taken a a bit of a sabbatical at the point when I first started, I guess I'll call it, into Altspace. And so I wasn't able to meet with her directly. And that made me want to meet her more. It's like, who is this person who had built this community and then wasn't there right now? And then I was fortunate that she had returned, and with such gusto, and I was able to meet her because you were hired, contracted by Meta. And so that is where we got our start. And then our first few weeks were just, I was just amazed. Like everything I had ever wanted, I knew that there was a different way to handle conflict. I didn't have words for it, but I knew I was seeking ways that were not so black and white and templated and mute, ban, kick, which is what I had been previously instructed through my many years as community management and just the various organizations that I had worked for and other community managers that I had met. And So that started just this learning, growing. I became a real mentee, and the guidance I started to receive was just invaluable. I mean, just crazy. And it was hard to implement at a big corporation, because just like a lot of different corporations I worked for, they still, it was I believe some of the phrases in my past lives that I've heard are burn the ships, work fast, and get things done. And so that didn't quite fit with the approach. and so but we really worked together to keep trying, and that's when I first started really thinking of values and what my values were and what I wanted to have as values for the community. And human first was a term that I first picked up from Dr. Diaz, from the human on purpose hops that she used to run in Horizon, which started in alt space and then came to Horizon. And I knew that there was something really big there, and that if we were going to really, how do you say this, implement kindness and compassion in the world, like it really started with these basic things, these values. It's like, if you strip everything down, if we're just like really compassionate and kind and think of people not as black and white villains, that there was just so much more to it. And yeah, Ruth, do you want to chime in?
Sure, yeah. First of all, when I met Molly, I was pretty bruised and pretty damaged by that point. My sabbatical, I'm going to put air quotes around that, was because I was cyberbullied by multiple people, influencers in the community in Horizon. And my character was assaulted when I would bring out messages of inclusion. And there was a lot of targeting and politics that was incredibly damaging to me, to the point where I really started to lose a sense of self. And I went to alt space to retreat. I was not being paid, and I was really pouring my heart during COVID into making space for intersectionally marginalized identities that at that time it was mostly a white cis male culture in Horizon. And so I started Horizon Creator Community to center diverse voices. That was the mission. And I got so targeted and hated for that, and excluded, and then also like just told like how harmful I was being by certain individuals that were holding a lot of the space and a lot of the power. And were also targeting people who weren't like them accidentally. I think mostly, a lot of times that's how it happens. But when I met Molly, I felt a sense of like fear, because I had also had some hard experiences with Meta at that point, and I felt like I was going to get the corporate lines, and the we're really impressed with you, but not really owning any of their own humanity. And Molly was different from the very beginning. Molly was using I statements and genuine and very sincere and warm. And many people in the community who had been burned by Meta and these influencers had met Molly only temporarily, briefly, in tiny event moments or whatever, but they all just had so much awe talking about Molly. And so it was like a new category was being born, that a human being could be in that big of a corporation and be genuine and heartful and really curious, and make space to learn and listen and get to know the community. So that happening was also part of what allowed me to really shift. I closed my practice. I had a thriving clinical practice, and I was an organizational consultant. And I closed that all down to take this contract at Meta because I had been promised a long-term role. This was going to be a kind of trial of sorts. So I wasn't even willing to consider a full-time multi-year contract, but I was willing to do a 6-month contract to see if I could make it work in an organization that big and that structured. Unfortunately, what also happened at Meta was a type of cyberbullying. It's very hard for me to own that because I am a conflict resiliency trainer and I don't like labels, especially ones that villainize any particular entity. But in doing my healing work, I've had to come to terms with a lot of what was happening there was a type of group bullying. And unfortunately, as I left the organization, I learned more information on why I had been hired and how dark that intention really was. I have never come out publicly speaking about this until today. I'm coming out now because I'm actually in a situation where there are some whistleblowers of sorts within multiple directions that are putting a lot of pressure on this. And I've continued to experience multiple layers of fallout from what happened with my time at Meta. So you are all part of the first group to actually really hear this as a group. But there's likely going to be some level of a published article, maybe even in a news source coming out soon on this. And so a lot of times when we think of cyberbullying, we think of one individual going after another, or a group going after one individual. But in this case, it was an organization, and it was also a really toxic culture. And I usually don't use the word toxic either, but the way that I frame that word is toxic means too much of one thing and not enough of the other. And in this particular application, there was too much cis white male power, and there was not enough of the others. And so HCC was meant to make a welcome mat and a space for people who weren't those identities to feel like they belonged and could get some community support and empowerment. We were really successful. We had a lot of volunteers, many of them intersectional also, which means they were suffering from all kinds of economic and physical hardships that the average person in power doesn't, but we kept making it work and sharing our knowledge and our resources and our time and including more and more people. By the time HCC was closed, also due to cyberbullying, over a year ago, we had 6,500 members on our Facebook page. And so it was a resounding success and also a resounding tragedy, partly because of these compacting pieces of not investing in community leadership and development. And I bring this story to you today to demonstrate the brevity of why Bridgemakers exists and what broken bridges and broken dreams and broken people it is being built off of. And I'm including myself when I say broken people. I have suffered enormously for what I believe in. And I've also had allies who've shown up and held space and listened and learned and reminded me of my worthiness. And I also include Laurel in that. Yeah, go ahead.
And I just want to also say before, this all ties, well, obviously it all ties in, but going forward, explaining what Bridgemakers is, this is the this is the dream. After I left, after I was over at Meta, I immediately went to HCC, and there's a lot in between what happened, but I went and I'm like, I am here. This is
like
it.
literally the day that Molli was laid off. Molli was like, hey, what do you need help with? So yes.
I was part of the big first round of the layoffs, and within hours, I contacted Ruth, and then from there, there's been so much that has connected us and has formed this incredible bond where we don't even have labels to define it. But that is now this story, everything we're doing here, and all the conflict resiliency that we conflict every
All the
minute,
time. Constantly.
we are just all the time.
Ongoing.
And through that we've built this. So I'm very excited to share this next part with everybody as well.
Same. And thank you all. I know that there's probably not necessarily that expectation of something so scandalous sounding and vulnerable, but this seemed like the truth to acknowledge and bridge between the vision and dream of Bridgemakers and the reality that we're here as somebody who, as a team, we've brought multiple events to educators in VR around cyberbullying this month. And part of my healing is learning how to own this and tell the truth here. I've been silent for a long time out of the need to protect the most vulnerable people connected to me, who are still contracted with Meta or were, and I'm finally just done with that. I can't stay silent anymore. I'm continuing to experience a lot of harm, sometimes on a weekly basis, connected to this whole thing. And so before this whole falling down the rabbit hole of social VR, I had done 20 plus years of self-growth and development and self-awareness work around my privilege and my power. And I had learned to live my truth and speak it despite the consequences. And I've been now through a 4-year really painful journey of having to be very, very quiet until today. So thank you to each of you for your witness in hearing some of this story. It's an ick story. It's a hard one, and there are a lot of details in it we don't have time to get into. But hopefully giving that some space to bring some authenticity to the importance and literally staking my livelihood and my life on what I believe in will help you understand the context of what you're seeing today. And thank you for the emojis. Okay, let's keep going. So many slides and so little time as usual. So Laurel asked a question before most of you got here, which was, Ruth or Dr. Diaz, what possessed you to, what?
There's like a thingy.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know.
Let's see if it disappears here. There we go.
Thanks.
Laurel asked this question about why would I have gotten involved with trolling? And this will now make more sense. I was not only canceled in a really bizarre and horrible way that you may get to read more about soon, but I was also canceled by the community about 6 months later. And because of the threats and the harm that came from Meta and that cancellation, I was really under a deep and I think somewhat accurate impression in the immediacy of those very severe events that anybody I associated with could be harmed in some way connected to me, that I was burned and it would burn other people to be connected. And so literally the Troll Project was born out of an incredibly lonely and dark place where I found myself world hopping alone in VR chat, which I'd been to before, but really just trying to go like, who can I talk to? I have to be silent about this. Who am I not going to hurt to be connected to? And then running into a group of trolls that were doing something I'd never seen before, which is they were using really harmful language and ideology, but also being very affectionate in their behavior with each other. And it just blew my mind. And I was more curious than I was broken and discouraged and afraid. And I thought, well, this is like the one corner I've never had time to really explore about social VR. I definitely had already implemented trolling reconciliation cycles and strategies in Horizon, but I thought these people are already burning themselves constantly. So maybe one burned person with a lot of skill and a whole bunch of burned people with very, very poor social skills will equal something new and we'll learn something. And as I got to know the human beings behind the harm, it was a weird mirror for me to recognize that I wasn't this. I wasn't what they were doing. I had been accused of being that, but I've never done those things, ever. And seeing that was the beginning of my healing process of going, okay, people treat me the way they treat these trolls, and people treat me the way the trolls treat people. But I haven't done these things, and I have never thought these things or believed these things. So how do I reconcile that? And so that was the beginning of my healing journey, was to go to people like Molli, who had stuck through incredibly hard moments, and say, hey, I'm interviewing trolls in the metaverse. Maybe you want to keep your eye on me here. This is kind of radical. And I kept bringing videos and stories until I convinced a handful of people to get involved with me. I think for the nature of time, we're not going to have time to go through these videos, but I will just briefly tell you this video is, I believe it's on the Bridgemakers site, but this slide deck will probably be made available with a recording on it. But this is a moment, it's about a minute-long video where this person you see up here is the friend of the King of Trolls. I was so immersed in interviewing trolls that I started getting word-of-mouth referrals for more and more sinister and notorious trolls. And the King of Trolls, specifically called by many people that, was adjacent to him. And you see him briefly in this video, but getting to talk to his sidekick, let's say his Robin to the Batman of harm, what I realized was that there's a lot of reachable people around the people that are doing a lot of harm. And this particular person described how much empathy it takes to troll. He had an amazing amount of insight that you can't antagonize people too severely or they just block you. And so it takes a nuanced agenda and skill set to be able to troll in a way that lasts, I guess. And that was a strange and fascinating insight. But the other thing about him is that when the King of Trolls got kicked out of sorts for audio issues, he asked me a really vulnerable question in this world. You can see the flags behind them, which is the LGBT, one of the LGBT hangout worlds in VR chat, is he said, what does it mean to be trans and be male to female? Like, he's like, I don't understand those distinctions. Is trans male or is it female? Like, what does that mean? And at first I thought he was trolling me, but when I gave him the answer and he sat for a long time and he was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Thank you. I realized that this was a vulnerable question by somebody who had never been around anybody that they felt safe enough to ask that question to, that they felt not judged. And they didn't feel like it was going to be a stupid question. And when his friend came back in, was like, what did I miss? He covered it up immediately. He was like, oh, nothing. We're just sitting here. And so that also confirmed for me that this was not about trolling me. It was we all are missing pieces of information when we're in a very biased or prejudicial society. So I encourage you to watch that at some point. But this is a very brief going through and saying, here's the progression of what we learned. So eventually in VR chat, as I was doing this troll project, more and more people started to gather and ask questions about why I was able to work with and talk to trolls, and what I knew and what I was as a leader. And eventually this massive crowd started to gather on one fateful day about 4 or so months ago, and they were pushing in on each other to where their avatars were overlapping. They were almost becoming one avatar, and they're crowding in on me, and I didn't understand what was happening until one voice in this amalgam of avatars was like, hey, are you going to teach us something and take us somewhere? And I realized that my kind of informal conversational world hops had become something that when people saw I was online, they would kind of jump on to see if I was going to say something interesting. And so this was one of the first massive world hops. I'm the purple bunny in the middle there, where we're sharing a circle and we're talking about being humans on purpose and what that looks like in virtual reality. And some of these people are leaders and some are just users who've heard about me and wanted to hear some of my messaging. I'm going to stop talking for a moment, see what Molly wants to say here.
So the other day when we were talking, Dr. Diaz and I were talking, she had said this to me and I wrote it verbatim during that. I was listening. The true measure of Bridgemakers' success will be that people in VR will return to physical reality and thrive, and the people in physical reality will come to VR to transform and grow. And this really summarizes the dynamic between both of us. I am in the physical realms to the parallel of how Dr. Diaz is in the virtual realms, and we share that with each other. And I just think that's like one of the most beautiful ways to summarize this movement.
Yeah, that we both are about a congruency. And what I love about Molly is how much she is the OG of world hopping. She hops all over the world. She's a llama. She is literally out on top of mountains almost every day. Her outfit to present today is accurate to how she dresses and what she loves to wear in physical reality. And while I admire that, I've also suffered from pretty severe and intense chronic illness most of my life. So that's not as much of an option for me. But I can kind of live vicariously through her. And every once in a while, Molly gets sucked down the rabbit hole back into VR. And every once in a while, I get sucked out to climb a not so steep mountain with Molly. And I believe that ultimately this technology is an opportunity for transformation. And some people in this early access time we're in are getting stuck in here and they're losing their identity and they're losing their sense of self. And then they're doing a lot of damage to each other. And my hope is that Bridgemakers is about supporting and empowering people who have woken up and realized buildings and being on purpose is more than something we have to do in physical reality. It's something we can also do in VR and with each other in every reality. And so, oh, what just happened? So I'm going to go faster through this one. There's a lot of words on here acknowledging that, but these are just some of the details about what we're doing and who we are. We have tons of different events. We have private groups focusing on different pieces. Everybody is welcome, not just leaders. We do have some members who are just literally taking themselves off mute in VR for the first time, and they're interested in someday in starting a group. But the idea is if you join Bridgemakers, you're there to be on purpose. You're there to manifest as a human being, as a better version of yourself. And even just in the last month, we've started our helpers habitat. We have multiple projects going on: avatar building, world building, culture building, music matching, so many different things. And we're also doing 3 to 5 events per week. And we have facilitators in training. And so hopefully over time, I'm doing less of those events per week, but they're all amazing and they all fulfill different needs and portions. And understand we have 15 minutes left and we keep going. So this is our recipe for practicing resiliency in Bridgemakers and in VR. Build a bridge, break the bridge, rinse and repeat, which sounds kind of intense, right? You build it and you break it, but it's actually about the micro conflicts and the micro dosing of what that means. And so we were joking about that idea of finding the gap. Where in the community systems are there missing elements? How do we identify the problem? How do we talk about that? And then we've got the conflict avoidance of social VR. I think that the very nature of using this technology and connecting online in any form is a type of conflict avoidance. Sometimes it's just pure loneliness or just curiosity, but many times it can be a chronic state of seeing conflict as something we can't feel successful at. And so this picture, you see us sitting in a hot tub of lava, literally in a world called hell. We're talking about climate change. And we're talking about how we avoid the pain in life because we don't believe we can grow from it. And what I appreciate about virtual reality is the ability to pair these user-generated content spaces with hard conversations. And the joke of it, of sorts, where we can switch into humor. And in this world, I was doing a lot of jokes and humor. Is allowing us to release some of that fear that we have around those topics and go into a more vulnerable place. That the anonymity, oftentimes people believe that anonymity can create harm, but I believe that anonymity creates vulnerability. And sometimes when we're harming each other, that is also a kind of disinhibited vulnerability. And so this is the most comfortable conversation I've ever had about climate change. And we were brought there by a leader who has a lot of demon avatars and has the name Escape Artist. And this was his favorite world, and he wanted to bring us to it. And this is how this conversation happened. It was really deep and meaningful. So problem questions. These are things you can ask when you're looking for that gap in community. How many people is it affecting? What kinds of identities are affected the most? Who has tried to bridge this before me? And who wants to help? And that is another one of our community leaders, Astral, and we're playing with dimensions in that one also. I already switched slides and we got to keep going here. So this is where we identified some problems, but then we did a survey and we started to ask, some of you filled this out, we started to ask community builders, what are your problems and how would you prioritize these? If you did have resources, if you did have education on the elements of community building, how would you address these problems? What would you want to see help for first? And again, keep in mind, this is us making all of this up without any kind of fiscal support or endorsement. This is out of the pain and the grief and also the trust that healing will come if enough people group together to build that healing. And every slide you see here, Molli has been behind the scenes helping coordinate and connect and invite people and build the infrastructure of the bridge, the non-glorious, ribbon cutting, where it's just pouring the concrete and getting things more solid. That has been how Molli continues to help. Yes, Molli, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just thanking you. Thanks.
Yes, and you were bringing up human first earlier, and so I really appreciate that. We're going to show you the 5 values very quickly here of Bridgemakers, and the first one is human first. And this picture that you see is an avatar built by one of our helpers and moderators, which is Lily, and it has the Bridgemakers logo on it. And I went into this world to take a picture and send it to her in gratitude. She gave me a body in virtual reality when nobody else had ever asked or tried to do that before. And she didn't just give it to me, she also heard my concern about being given something so beautiful and customized. And so I had reframed her project not as giving an avatar to Heyu or Ruth, it was a community leader avatar. And so she's building a series of avatars for community leaders in leading world hops and showing what conflict is and teaching on conflict. And I think she has 4 different ones at this point. And so this is what it looks like when we take me first out of it and we say human first. This is also an application of that value. So we've been doing a weekly support group for understanding the complexities of intersectional identity clashing. So we had a community member briefly in our Discord who identifies as Muslim, and they got into a very public tangle about LGBTQ identities. And even though I was pretty proud of the community and how that was handled and compassionately held a boundary, but also a bridge for this person, they left pretty quickly in this tangle. And so part of the commitment is, how do we learn from the conflicts, and how do we not just say, well, our wokeism worked and we protected the community? How do we actually look and see what are examples of the complexity of combining these 2 identities? There's a brilliant HBO show called Sort of. We're watching 1 episode per week. It's 20 minutes, and we're learning about what that looks like on the ground, which is really complicated and not simple. Okay, Molly, you want to just take this one?
So the next value we have here is kindness. And, you know, that's something that I feel like is a practice for me. I have an empathetic nature, but sometimes it's hard to stay kind, and especially when there are things coming at me. So this value is very important for me to keep very first and foremost at center, because I have to ask questions and stay curious with people, and not just assume the worst, because it's never black and white like that.
And how often in social VR, for those of you who attend the Immersive Connection series, we're getting to practice and break down and recognize how much our minds fill in the blanks. And if we're feeling fear, if I'm feeling fear about you, I may fill in the blanks and see you as the worst possible version of who you are. And then if I'm really on an agenda and I'm unconscious, I may create a campaign to harm you on that, which has definitely happened to me. And so how do I find kindness in that incredible pain? How do I not villainize the people who are villainizing me? This value being so high up in our list, we put our values on every document. We're starting to bring up our values more and more in our events. How do we integrate these values as anchor points to keep us true, to keep us a community when the storms come, when the bridges break? So this is pairing with one of the photos one of our participants and helpers took, that kindness doesn't always feel good. You know, technically this is a picture of a swamp, but there's also kindness growing up through it. And in VR, you don't get muddy, but you would otherwise. So there was so much beauty in this photo that I was like, I don't remember this in our hop. I don't remember the experience of it. But just by posting this, I experienced this really deep kindness from this member, and recognizing that the paradox of that is kindness sometimes is hard. We hear hard truths, and if they're delivered with compassion and with invitation and with curiosity, then we can grow from it. But let's practice that kindness even when we have conflicts. And then this is a kind of opposite slide for you to see. This is us exploring what sadness looked like. And this is a grave, it's a really incredible world I encourage you to check out in VR Chat that was made by a user whose mother was dying, and was choosing to take her life from cancer. And so this was before she died. They made her grave for her, and it was an incredible experience to go there with a group and hear people crying out of joy and also horror, being faced so deeply with such an intimate relationship. And that choice and that courage for someone to prepare that story for somebody they cared about. And the kindness of finding that pain and that beauty together. Transparency is another value. I'm going to go through this one a little quicker because of time, which is funny. Transparency disappears when people feel like they don't have enough time to practice it. The pictures you see here are pictures of groups that were had where there was a lot of transparency coming out in that group about the imperfection of Bridgemakers, about one of these groups was focusing on addictions, and instead of just talking about addictions to substances, people were very transparent and vulnerable about their concerns about being addicted to social VR itself. And the other photo was a photo where the people who showed up that night were male passing, male identifying, and I'm leading a group with a full men's group of sorts. And what I had to acknowledge there is I don't know what it's like to be you. And we're covering this topic of rage. And mostly I felt compelled to apologize and say, I don't know what it's like to be expected in the world to always be embodying this extreme emotion. And I'm sorry you've gone through that. So transparency doesn't just mean we're going to show you our data or our numbers. It also means the intimacy to admit what we don't know and bridging with vulnerability. And we have stewardship. Again, I'm really conscious of time, so I'm going to move through that one quickly. This is another event that we had where we were stewarding our disappointment as community builders and all the losses, and making space and talking about what it felt like to lose what we had dreamed of and feeling incredible disappointment. So steward as a value doesn't just mean we take care of the structure, it means we take care of our hearts. We take care of our humanity. And then finally, we have iteration. And I love this one because this was also another group. But here we had a swamp that kind of looked like oil, and somebody turned into a dinosaur and looked like they were either going to take a nap or they were the last one and they were going to die. And it made me think about iteration for the dinosaurs and iteration for ourselves. Sometimes things just die. And how do we pick up from that and build bridges even with those bones? And so making space for challenges, this was kind of a humorous one I don't have time to go into, but we practice conflict playfully and sometimes very purposefully in Bridgemakers on sometimes a daily basis in our Discord and in our groups. And we were supposed to be here to examine the emotion of terror. And then we got into a fender bender on purpose, actually. It was intentionally done by the person driving into them. But we got to all kind of enact the role play of what we do when we have conflict and how do we repair that with a giant tornado swirling in the background. So this is another kind of group we're doing, which is called troll play. We reenact conflicts that are happening in our community systems. Over to the right, you can see a group of us in a circle. We're actually standing at the bottom of a well that we found, and somebody fell down. And we talked about the value of falling and falling with each other. If one person falls, we all fall. And staying with each other through that and figuring out how to get out. And we had this whole rescue operation that happened. So another video I can't show you, showing you what troll play looks like, where we turn into 3-inch figures and run around and reenact conflict. The troll project has now mostly turned into heart ninjas. Some of you saw some of those demonstrations These are extraordinary human beings who are innovating on how to handle trolls in a humane way with heart. And we also have a section in our Discord called Bridgemakers. And what you'll see here is the note from an ex-troll who has found our community and is doing some healing. And the Bridgemakers was made as a home for the ex-trolls who want to challenge us and target us and show us all the things we think are touchy and feely, but maybe make us vulnerable in ways that could break our bridge. And yet we've also had a lot of arguments in Bridgemakers, and they were very encouraged to see how we were responding to the conflict. So it was great to see that we had accidentally caught an ex-troll. And back to rinse and repeat. This is another, this is 2 pictures from a world hop we did, or I did with a leader. And this leader was gonna quit being a leader. They were so discouraged and feeling so broken. And so we graffitied some walls together, and one of their friends came in and trolled me like a spider and crawled up on top of my face. And I was like, well, I guess the trolls find me even if I'm in private instances. And yet we talked about the iteration of it all and how we feel the brokenness and we try again. So with that in mind, I think we're going to be at the end here. This was our last leadership summit just a few days ago. We had a great crowd of people all really leaning in. And then I have a whole bunch of slides, which are just the favorite pictures I couldn't include in the rest, but I think we're out of time, so I will leave it here. I love the art and absurdity of this one and want to invite you to join us, bridgemakers.world. Are there any questions or comments or emojis for our closing here?
Oh, tons of emojis, tons of emojis. Oh. Yay. Yeah. I want to thank you, both of you, first of all, for being open and honest and trusting us to hear your story. That's a gift. That's a gift. Thank you so much. And also know that to both of you, you have done so much for Educators in VR and for myself, but and for many of the people that are in this room, but we're also here to support you. So we're your cheerleaders. So thank you very much. So appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have time for a few questions. We are running a little over, but this is the first time in weeks we don't have another event back to back. If anyone has any questions for Ruth and Molly, would love to hear them. Just unmute and shout out or jump up and down, raise your hand, whatever you want to do. Well, I want to get it kicked off with, you've talked about many of the things you have going on and a little bit of the plans for the future, but what's your long-term vision for Bridgemakers?
Yeah, I mean, the 10-year plan, which I'm writing about, all I do with my days is do meetings and events and write. The 10-year plan is that Bridgemakers is a leadership academy for people in physical reality who want to upskill how to be leaders and want to wade into the incredible river of turmoil that social VR can be, and get in the grunge and the dirt with the rest of us in our merging psyches and learn how to be stronger and more integrated human beings. But the way to get there is going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of people building that bridge with us and breaking it in microdoses so that it can be more resilient to the storms ahead.
Hey, can I add to that?
Yes, please.
Yes. Also, can everyone hear me from
yes,
over
we
here?
Can. Yes, we can.
All right, fantastic.
I know that voice anyway.
Hi. Also, yes.
Hey, it's a human.
Yes. I really wish I could have my gator in here. It's kind of sad not having Gator Boy in here. But anyways, one of the big things that I really want to do in Bridgemakers is really help community leaders understand diversity and inclusion. There's a lot of people in the group who have a lot of experience dealing with also an assortment of different kinds of people. So I've created some resources that would absolutely be wonderful handouts for people who are community leaders and who are community builders. Things that would be really good to discuss with your mod team. HeyU also has some of the psychology behind it, and it kind of inspired that one, preference to kill, how preferences become biases, becomes prejudice and discrimination, and so on and so forth. And we really want to educate and teach people these concepts. The biggest one that we're trying to, it's like the long-term goal, is to have effectively a museum for Bridgemakers where anyone can go in VR and see all of these concepts visually, physically shown and demonstrated, together with historical references and maybe even some interactive components to get people to really understand and see these concepts and hopefully learn from them.
Lovely. Yeah, really well put. We're lucky and just incredibly honored to have Sotolo's wisdom, definitely a subject matter expert in social VR. And what does it mean when we can wear avatars that don't embody the diversity characteristics that we necessarily have to wear in physical reality? How do we still create inclusive experiences and stories and amplify marginalized voices and build the society we want to live in physical reality? I believe Sotolo is an incredible bridge to that experience and already has an amazing museum. If you have PC VR, you can check out in VR chat. So yeah, thank you for that comment. Any other
Beautiful.
questions or comments?
Thank you. To unmute in, for those of you who are new here, if you're in PC, M mutes and unmutes.
Someone to my right, owner, had a question.
Let's hear.
Oh.
Unmute. We'd love to hear.
Maybe.
Still
You can use your
muted,
wrist.
buddy. There you go.
I'm sorry, I guess that was a misunderstanding.
Oh, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, well, I'm
That's
just
okay.
learning to use VR, and I'm a really new guy in the VR world.
That's fine.
So
No worries.
I'm
glad to
here
have
due
you
to
here.
I'm here due to my studies. So I'm trying to observe the communities here and also try to understand the possible issues like cyberbullying, and also myself also had to deal with cyberbullying in my second day. So that was why
I'm so
I
sorry.
ended up here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you
And
with
it
Mount
happened
Royal?
because of, sorry?
Are you with Mount Royal College?
No, I'm in
No, okay.
Turkey.
All right.
No,
That's fine.
I'm in Turkey.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, we have
Yeah.
Educators in VR has teamed up with Mount Royal College in Calgary, and their students are supposed to be attending these events. So I was just checking. Was going to check off attendance.
I see.
Glad you're here.
Well, I'm on my postgraduate studies. So on my second day, I came up with a group of people in VR chat who made fun of my avatar, and due to its simplicity. So it was my first time, and also I understood the situation happened in the snow crash. The character there was having problems to its being poor and having a lower kind of avatar. So I had the same thing, I guess. So,
Well,
yeah.
no, actually you didn't. Let's just make you feel a little more welcome. That is 1 minute in the life of VR chat. You could have been in the most expensive avatar. The least, if you go in the public areas, know that is an ongoing. That's normal behavior, unfortunately. So you can have any avatar you want, and we believe that just like anyone should dress however they want to and be respected for those choices. The same thing goes for the avatar, and so it had nothing. It was just it's part of that culture of that platform, and to help you if you would like to, if you open your menu, you'll see a little stand up and sit down avatar.
Uh-huh.
If you look down to your controllers, and right now you're squatted on the floor. So if you'd like to stand up.
It might be because of I had an injury and right now I'm laying down actually. That might be it.
No, but that's how you force your avatar into a straight position. No matter what your regular. There you go. You're standing up.
Bonus.
Okay.
Oh, see,
Good
something
Thank
learned.
you.
Lesson,
Yes.
lesson learned, lesson
Thank you.
learned.
Yay.
All right, we are
Thank
so
you.
glad you are here. Did you have anything, Ruth? Maybe I'm not sure if she's going to be back or not. She lost internet. But did you have another question for Molly or for us? And
Well,
great topic to
for now,
research.
yeah, thank you. For now, I don't have questions, but I guess I will be observing more these places, especially the engagement app,
Excellent.
because I'm trying to understand because, for example, I checked the billboards out there, and I saw VR is built around the education and also some of the humanities concepts, let's say. But I didn't see anything related to tourism or anything something similar to that. So
You mean the posters in this event?
yeah.
Okay, that's representative of Educators in VR. That's my company,
Mm-hmm.
and we are one of hundreds, if not thousands of different groups that meet here in Engage XR, and so our focus is on immersive education, which
I see.
includes cyberbullying, the psychology. We also have we work with a variety of different tourism and travel-based organizations. There's Ruth, and to teach people about the psychology of it. But Educators in VR is dedicated to teaching teachers how to teach, and that's a wide swath of things. But hopefully you will join our Discord, and please contact me. I'm Laurel, and I would love to put you in contact if tourism and travel is one of your focuses. We have one of the world's leading experts in creating virtual spaces for tourism and travel in our Educators in VR membership, so I can connect you.
So
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you a lot for that. Unfortunately, in Turkey, I'm not able to connect the Discord
that's
to this
right.
band. Yeah, but
you got to get
if
but you can use our contact page on our website at educatorsinvr.com.
that I can do that.
Okay.
Yes. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
if I could
Mhm.
say something about that, I
Please.
don't know how
Yeah.
many people here are
Santalo?
in VR chat, but there are. I'm actually friends
Mhm.
with someone who recreated a 7-Eleven from Taiwan, and
Nice.
yeah, in VR chat. So if virtual tourism is an
That's amazing.
interesting,
Mhm.
yeah, if that's a concept that you're interested in seeing, I could put you in touch with some people who are interested in that, but that is not a large goal in the platform. That is going to be harder to see. It is physically harder to make those worlds. It would typically take a much larger team to be able to produce that content and then make it accurate. And then if there's any translations needed, that's like all of those steps need to be followed.
Right.
see.
Well, that's a
But yeah.
topic that's bigger than what we're here to talk
Thank
about.
you.
But
Yeah,
but
please.
Yes.
I thank you. But you know what we just witnessed, Ruth, while you were gone? Community started happening here. We started doing networking. We started connecting, sharing. Ruth, you're muted. And it was beautiful.
Yay.
So thank you for that.
See
Yeah,
that.
thank you for that. Yay, it was wonderful. Any other questions before now that Ruth is, Dr. Diaz is back, is there any questions? Hey, Dr. Heartbeats, you missed an awesome session. Sorry. We haven't
Glad you're here.
filmed. Yeah.
Yes.
Molly?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here and supporting us
Mhm.
and supporting EDVR, and just really appreciate you all. And if you do have questions, more questions that you think of later, we do have the Discord, and you could go
And
to
the website.
bridgemakers.world and
Mhm.
and find that, and really just wanted to say thank you, and thank you, Laurel, for everything this month. It's been really a pleasure getting
thank
to know
you.
you on a personal
Yeah.
and professional level. And
Thank you.
yeah, I just really
Same
appreciate
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruth, any last words before we close this up?
No, I would love to grab a photo though. if anybody's up to that. I think there's something really lovely about just commemorating these moments.
Okay,
with,
well, before we do that, we're going to close out the video. So the video recording. So I want to thank
Sure.
everyone for being here. I want to thank Dr. Ruth Diaz and the amazing Molli Aronce, and thank you all also for being here. In a moment, we'll do the selfie. So thank you, everyone. And there's more
Yay.
cyberbullying events. So check them out at educatorsinvr.com or on our YouTube channel. Thanks.